In the gospel today, we're given an account of another post-resurrection appearance of Jesus to two of his disciples. We are told that two weary followers of Jesus were returning from Jerusalem after the events that had happened on Mount Calvary. They were saddened, confused, and disappointed. Only a few days before, they had been witnesses and participants in the excitement of the crowd as Jesus entered Jerusalem amidst of shouts of joy and expectation. But only a short time later, they watched as Jesus was arrested, condemned to a horrible death, and eventually died as a criminal on a cross. Shouts of joy had become calls for execution. What had gone wrong? For these disciples who had followed Jesus, what happened on Calvary seemed like the end of all their hopes and dreams, that Jesus was truly the long-awaited Messiah, the liberator of the Jewish nation from the oppressive Roman occupation. But now, with the sound of the hammer banging nails into Jesus' feet and hands, the hope was evaporated in an instant. There was nothing to do now but return to their homes and look at a new future. While they were returning home to the small village of Emmaus, they were discussing all that they had seen and experienced in the last few days. As they walked along, they encountered Jesus and began to walk along with him. The disciples did not recognize that it was Jesus walking with them. Jesus had heard them talking and asked what they had been talking about. One of the disciples, Cleophas, was surprised that Jesus appeared to have not been aware of the events that had taken place. Needing to process all that he had witnessed, Cleophas began to explain about the death of Jesus, and even talked about how Jesus was hoped to be the fulfillment of all the Old Testament prophecies. Jesus listened patiently, and he proclaimed to them, "How foolish you are." Jesus then gave them a Bible lesson and reminded them that all that had happened was the will and plan of God. After arriving at Emmaus, the disciples, in true Middle Eastern hospitality, invited Jesus to stay with them for the night. After washing their feet, they sat down together at a table, and Jesus took bread, said the blessing, broke the bread, and gave it to them. St. Luke preserved this story of the road to Emmaus, not so that we could look back and be envious of how blessed these two disciples were to have had this encounter with Jesus, but rather so that we could believe that what Jesus had done for them, he continues to do for us. When we follow our sacred tradition of coming together for Mass on Sunday, the church becomes our Emmaus. It is at Mass that Jesus continues to speak to us through the sacred scriptures. As we stand and kneel before the altar during the Eucharistic prayer, we see once again the actions of Jesus at our table as he takes bread, pronounces a blessing, breaks the bread and says, "Take and eat. This is my body. Take and drink. This is my blood." It has not been easy to be away from communal worship in our parish churches. Because of this, we have been asked to make our homes into domestic churches where we gather for prayer and support. Even though we may be fearful, feel isolated, and must stay at home, Jesus is still walking with us. He will continue to speak to us in the scriptures and prayers we read and say together. He will sit at our table and break bread with us. Our hope is that soon we can come back together to celebrate Mass together. Meanwhile, let us recognize that Jesus is walking with us. We continue to pray for the end of the virus. We pray for the brave doctors and nurses who are giving so much to help slow down the spread of the virus. God bless you, and may our Blessed Mother hold each of you in her protective arms.